next guest is Thomas Arnold, a veteran San Diego journalist who has written for San Diego Union Tribune, the North County Times, now defunct, other local papers and magazines. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
Good to be here.
Allison, you want to start us?
Okay, well, the biggest political event, obviously, since the last time you were on the show was the election. And I think North County has really surprised people because the protest rallies since Donald Trump was elected president have turned out to be a lot larger than even the advocates, I think, were expecting. The one up at San Marcos was expected to be 1,600 people, 4,000 people showed up. Do you think that politicians in North County need to be cognizant of, public opinion here, that especially the Republican politicians? How should they play this, bearing in mind that there seems to be quite a bit of disturbance over the results of the election?
I don't think the national elections have much of an impact on local voters in terms of how they feel, because North County, especially in the coastal areas, North County voters are really concerned about one thing and one thing only, and that is growth and traffic. Land use is the #1 issue in North County, and I'm sure there were a lot of people from North County who were engaged in anti-Trump, pro-women's rights rallies, but you know what? The next day they go back and they're sitting on the 5 and they're going, I don't want to have that development built there. So you could have the most pro-Trump council member in Oceanside, Carlsbad, or Encinitas, and if he's against a huge housing project,
yeah, right.
They'll love him.
So the biggest thing that happened last year really for North County politically was perhaps the Caruso project in Lilac Hills.
Well, exactly, and you saw just how important land use is. In November, you had the Encinitas City Council basically elect a supermajority of slow and no growthers. And in Carlsbad, for the first time in the city's 50-plus year history, you saw a Democrat, a very liberal Democrat, get elected to the council.
Have you seen any change in the month or so in Carlsbad in terms of just the dynamics on that Carlsbad council that has been Republican for so long?
A lot of 4-1 votes.
Okay.
And I mean, the solution. I mean, I'd make $1 million as a consultant if I had a solution, because you've got so many different factions now springing up. It used to be that the liberals were very much for the environment and they wanted to preserve the coast, but they were also for affordable housing. We don't want these high home prices. Now you've got the liberals who have pretty much divided into 2 factions. You've got the smart growth crowd, which follows Governor Jerry Brown's mandate that we've got to increase housing supply for all price groups in California. And then you've got the no-growthers who don't want anything in Encinitas, Carlsbad, or Oceanside. They wanted to stay the same way it was 20 years ago.
What about the County Board of Supervisors? How does the election of Kristen Gaspar, what does that mean for all these huge housing developments that are planned in the unincorporated areas that the county's going to be, things like Lilac Hills Ranch and Newland Sierra?
Well, Kristen is interesting because she was the mayor of Encinitas, and she was a Republican and a pretty conservative Republican, and yet she was very popular with the people. On the Board of Supervisors, I think she is seen as a moderate, as are Diane Jacob and Ron Roberts. Greg Cox, somewhat too. Bill Horn, definitely not. So I think the jury really is out, because I don't know if the Board of Supervisors will focus on trying to bring projects like that and speed them through before their terms expire. If they think Kristen will automatically fall in line, they're probably up for a surprise, because there is an election in 4 years, and Kristen will have to face re-election. So, she's not going to be as open to building up everything as perhaps the other supervisors may be, who have, they're all being termed out.
Yeah. Given that they're all being termed out, you've got a chance for a real sea change in the political persuasion of that particular board. You've got the evidence already of what's happened in Encinitas and Carlsbad. Do you see a continued purpling of San Diego County and the coast?
On the Board of Supervisors, it's very interesting, because if they're smart, they won't push through an overly aggressive growth strategy. They will take a cue about what's been happening in the coastal cities and pull the reins back. Because if they don't, then they're going to get a lot more very liberal people in there. You know, especially in North County, and I think you're going to see it on the local level everywhere. Party lines don't matter as much as what kind of a position you take on land use and the environment.
How do you, and we're going to talk about this with our next guests in this particular show, but how do you view this struggle between the need for housing and the fact that affordable housing is essentially non-existent here, and the notion that people do not want any more people?
Number one, you've got to, face the reality that Governor Brown is very much in the smart growth camp. He recognizes, and correctly so, that there is a housing shortage in California, and that we need more housing for all price groups, especially on the coast. The argument is, well, not everybody can afford to live on the coast, and maybe that's a good thing. So you're going to probably see cities like Encinitas, which has rejected a housing element, which is a basic a mechanism to comply with state law, and the city said no. But again, this is the same city that over the council's objections of 3.5 years ago voted for Proposition A, which took zoning issues out of the elected officials' hands and put them in the hands of the people. So Encinitas, if the people have their way, they will try to fight the state on these housing mandates and argue, look, your cookie cutter approach doesn't work. You can't expect Encinitas to have the same number of affordable housing units as, say, Riverside or Escondido. But then Sacramento lawmakers, if they're smart, will go, well, look at Carlsbad. They've made it work.
Well, but in the case of Encinitas, they're going to get sued whichever way they jump. So in some ways, they already know that they're going to get sued by the developers and, in fact, now by an environmental attorney if they don't come up with a housing element.
Right.
So the other alternative is to get sued by the residents,
Yeah.
which seems to be their next option. I don't know whether you think that's something that might happen next.
I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Catherine Blakespeare's shoes. I mean, she's a smart woman, but I mean, here she is, very much a standard bearer for the Democratic establishment. I mean, her Facebook page was, peppered with photos of her with Hillary Clinton. She participated in the marches, and yet she's being vilified, by some on the far no-growth crowd as, also in line with the developers.
I think she's raised the possibility that the state might intervene and force a housing element on the city. Do you think that's a likelihood or a possibility? I mean, can you see that?
I think the hardcore people in Encinitas who seem to be driving the city's agenda and who have sway with voters, they don't care. Come on, state, come in, bring it on. What are you going to do to us? Sue us.
We've only got about a minute left, Tom, and I want to change the topic on you a little bit. You had been writing last year for the Seaside Courier, and that publication appears to have ceased. Can you tell us about what's happened?
Yes, the publisher ran out of money. A lot of people liked the paper and wanted to read it, but she could never get the investors ready that who are needed to launch a publication like that. Simple example: she hired ad people who were only on commission. You can't do that. You got to invest in the salary and let them build things up. So Alice ran out of money, and the paper is no longer in existence.
And its website is no longer being serviced either, I take it?
No.
Okay.
There was talk about keeping it alive
Right.
on a low basis, but somebody has to provide money for it.
Do you think it might have survived if it had been in another North County city? Because there are already a couple of papers coming out of Encinitas.
Well, its focus really was on Carlsbad and Encinitas. And again, I mean, if she would have had the connections in Carlsbad to rally people up and support the paper, it didn't take that much. But in the end, it just didn't materialize.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We're out of time. Sorry about that. Thank you for being on the show with us tonight.